Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Baier. We will have an extended interview with Vice President Pence in just a few minutes. First up tonight, President Trump and his leadership team working both the hard and soft sell to try to get reluctant conservatives to go along with the Obamacare repeal and replace bill called the American Health Care Act. The soft sell comes tonight in, of all places, the White House bowling alley. But the pressure tactics are well underway just about everywhere else. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is here with that story from the North Lawn. Good evening, John.
Bret, good evening to you. The White House's legislative team is conducting a little 10-pin diplomacy tonight, inviting House Republicans over here to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue for a bowling party, hoping to strike a deal on health care. The president wasn't tipping his hand on his healthcare sales pitch today, meeting with CEOs of small banks. But the White House is putting the hard sell on the AHCA.
No matter where you are, especially on the conservative side, you cannot possibly believe that the current healthcare system is an effective program. It is a monstrosity. It is a government gone wrong.
Republicans may be united in their opposition to Obamacare, but there is a tremendous amount of blowback on what the White House and House Speaker want to replace it with. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who had dinner with the president last night, proclaimed the bill will never pass the Senate in its current form. Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, widely seen as the president's wingman in the upper chamber, tweeted that the plan will be dead on arrival. House health care bill can't pass Senate without major changes, he wrote. To my friends in House, pause, start over, get it right, don't get it fast. President Trump also held out an olive branch to conservative groups fiercely opposed to the replacement bill, hosting them at the White House last night. While the initial reaction seemed positive,
the bill as it stands now has serious problems, but I'm encouraged that the president indicated they're working to make it better.
Others dug in. The president of FreedomWorks, Adam Brandon, took aim at Republicans in a fundraising email, writing, quote, "I'm furious. For years, these frauds have lied to our faces. They promised to repeal Obamacare, and now that they're in power, they're starting to back down. This is outrageous." The White House was also taken aback today by the disclosure that former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn acted as a, quote, foreign agent during the campaign, doing lobbying work that may have benefited the government of Turkey. Flynn was paid some $530,000 for his effort.
I don't believe that was known.
Press Secretary Sean Spicer today said the president was unaware of what Flynn was doing before giving him the National Security Advisor job.
Had the president have known that, would he have appointed him?
I don't know, John. That's a hypothetical that I'm not prepared to ask.
The press secretary also clarified a statement he made yesterday where he appeared to say definitively that the president was not the target of a Department of Justice probe.
There is no reason to believe that he's the target of any investigation. I think
today Spicer said, well, no one from DOJ has actually told them that.
I said, you're right. I said I'm not aware, and we're not aware, and that's why we want the House and the Senate to do what the president has asked of them to look into this, but no, we're not aware.
The White House has yet another looming issue to deal with. 5 states have now lined up to try to block the president's new immigration ban executive order in court. They are seeking a restraining order to prevent it from going into effect in its scheduled date of March 16th. Bret?
John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thank you. I asked Vice President Pence about that revelation regarding Mike Flynn. You'll hear that in just a few minutes. Right now, Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill tonight with a ground-level look at the battle over the Republicans' new health care bill.
Today marks the beginning of the end of Obamacare.
After 27 hours, the Republican health care plan passed 2 House committees. Energy and Commerce voted in favor Thursday afternoon.
We're united as a committee. You saw that with the unanimous votes. We're uniting as a conference, and we're going to pass this bill.
Ways and Means backed the plan at 4:17 this morning, and the long hours led to a few rare, lighter moments.
After 23 hours, Mr. Chairman, not only the voice goes, the mind goes a little bit, sir.
House Speaker Paul Ryan went into professor mode to sell the GOP package with a PowerPoint presentation on the conservative components of this plan, trying to win over his reluctant right flank.
This is the closest we will ever get to repealing and replacing Obamacare. The time is here. It really comes down to a binary choice.
The choice being this Republican plan or Obamacare. And House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi blasted the new proposal.
It's really a cruel bill that the Republicans have put forth, and it will increase the number of uninsured in our country.
On the Senate side, Democratic leader Chuck Schumer suggested Republicans should drop what he called an irresponsible plan.
No one likes this bill. Hospitals, doctors, governors, conservatives, liberals, nonpartisan groups, and most of all, the people who will no longer have affordable health care.
Some senators are concerned about the final product the House would send them and what the cost of it will be. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell tried to reassure them.
There's going to be plenty of opportunity for senators of both parties to change this bill as it moves along. This is not being done in secret.
But the Speaker said there are limits.
It's really important to try and iron out all the differences, to show that there's folks who say, gosh, you should have this and that in this bill. Reconciliation doesn't let you do it.
Ryan spent a lot of time saying this must be done in steps due to the Senate rules on reconciliation. Now some House conservatives are countering, saying perhaps it's time to blow up Senate rules and throw everything into one big bill. Bret?
Mike Emanuel live on Capitol Hill. Mike, thanks. And by the way, reconciliation again getting 51 votes to pass an economic bill rather than 60 normally needed in the U.S. Senate. The list of states suing over President Trump's latest immigration travel ban is growing. Washington State and Massachusetts are joining Hawaii in the action. Oregon and New York are also reportedly interested in joining as well. Washington State's Attorney General says he will ask the judge who issued the restraining order against the president's first ban to rule that the order applies to the second as well. Stocks were up slightly today. The Dow and the S&P 500 both gained 2. The Nasdaq was up 1. The FBI is on a mole hunt tonight. The Bureau is trying to find out who gave top secret details of CIA hacking tools to WikiLeaks. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge tells us what the head of WikiLeaks is saying today.
Fox News has learned that the FBI is deploying a highly specialized team created after the 2013 NSA leaks to identify and isolate insiders stealing government secrets. Prior to President Trump's meeting with CIA Director Mike Pompeo and Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly, White House spokesman Sean Spicer said the breach is serious and there may be other issues.
There's grave concern that the president has about the release of national security and classified information that threatens and undermines our nation's security. Obviously, he believes that the systems at the CIA are outdated and need to be updated.
Speaking from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he's been holed up since 2012 to avoid extradition to Sweden, the head of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, said the CIA created more than 30 types of malware and sloppy security exposed the files. Asked whether the leaked documents shed light on the president's allegations that Trump Tower was wiretapped, Assange offered no direct evidence and a fresh allegation.
A real question whether that technology is being used or has been used in these types of investigations.
The Russian foreign minister seemed to relish the chaos.
When we were blamed of doing something, they presented evidence such as fingerprints of our Russian hackers. Now it is getting known that the CIA is able to get access to such fingerprints and then probably use them.
And on Capitol Hill, the Republican chairman of the House Armed Services Committee told Fox News that he believes WikiLeaks is being used by Moscow.
We have never seen WikiLeaks release information about Russian or Chinese or other countries' intelligence systems. They only disclose information about ours. So it's another form of attack designed to weaken the United States.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange said nothing about his source and offered to work with tech companies to defeat the CIA's hacking tools. A CIA spokesman defended aggressive intelligence operations overseas, saying Assange is hardly a bastion of truth and integrity, Bret.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
To talk about all of these issues tonight, I sat down with Vice President Mike Pence earlier today on Capitol Hill. His first interview from his Senate office. As Vice President, he is President of the U.S. Senate, and he gets one of those. I started by asking about the repeal and replace rollout and whether the Trump administration and congressional leadership misjudged the level of conservative pushback.
There's very broad consensus among Republicans in the House and Senate and the American people that Obamacare has failed. virtually every promise of Obamacare was broken. They said, if you like your doctor, you can keep them. If you like your insurance, you can keep them. Millions of Americans have lost their doctor, have lost their insurance, and the costs have skyrocketed around the country, 25% increase in premiums last year alone. And so we're really beginning from a position of consensus on what we need to accomplish, but in an open legislative process, we're working through how to get there. But the President made it very clear, literally the day after the election, to the leadership of the House and Senate that he wanted to make repealing Obamacare the top priority, but he wanted to repeal and replace Obamacare at the same time. And the legislation introduced this week in the House begins that process. We're open and talking about ways we can improve that bill, but that combined with administrative action by the Secretary of Health and Human Services and ultimately by likely additional legislation will get us to a point before we get to the spring this year where Obamacare will be gone and it will be replaced with the kind of healthcare system that gives the American people more choices in their health insurance and gives states more freedom and more flexibility to provide Medicaid in the best way they see fit for our most vulnerable.
So I guess that's the problem, is that some conservatives have a problem with the 3 phases and buying in that they're going to see all they're going to see in phase 3 or 2 and 3. Speaker Ryan says there's not going to be a lot of tinkering on this first bill in order to get it through reconciliation. Not to get in the weeds, but we know the reconciliation is 51 votes in the Senate. For some, it's like you're saying the Popeye Wimpy, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today, and they're not sure that they're ever going to see the payment.
Well, I think they can count on President Trump's going to be a man of his word, and the President made a commitment to not only repeal Obamacare, but to replace it with the kind of reforms that would allow Americans to buy health insurance across state lines, the way you buy life insurance, the way you buy car insurance, and by giving states the flexibility to implement reforms in Medicaid, a little bit like we did in the state of Indiana, where those programs will better serve our most vulnerable citizens. But I have to tell you, this is all part of, I think, a very healthy debate, a healthy dialogue. The President has been meeting with leaders in the Congress, also conservative thought leaders around the country. I've been doing the same. What's different than back in 2010, though, Bret, when Obamacare was literally forced through the Congress with very little debate, is what the American people are seeing is really what they expect Congress to do, and that is to propose and to consider amendments, to see if there's ways to improve legislation, and we're going to continue to drive to an outcome that'll serve the best interests of the American people.
How much can you change it? How much give can you give to conservatives on this first bill, considering the constraints of actually getting it through the way you want to get it through?
Well, I think we're going to listen very intently to conservative leaders. And, I was a very active conservative when I was in the House of Representatives, and my respect for the men and women who are in the conservative caucus in the House and in the Senate is really boundless. These are people that understand the solutions that we can bring to our healthcare economy, but we're all literally on the same page about where we need to go. But how you get there is oftentimes complicated in Washington, D.C., based upon the arcane rules of the institution. But what President Trump has said to our whole team is continue to engage members. This is the bill, but if there are ways to improve that bill and to give people greater confidence that we're all going to arrive at the same place where Obamacare is done and we've replaced it with the kind of health care reforms that'll lower the cost of health insurance by expanding people's choices and giving states more flexibility, and that's where we're headed.
So eventually it's going to come down to that binary choice, and you're going to expend political capital to make sure it gets across the finish line.
President Donald Trump is a man of his word, and among all the things that he promised, and there were many to the American people, I think what folks have seen from day one of this administration is the President has been working in an energetic way to keep his promises to the American people. But he decided the day after the election, Bret, that number one priority, the first priority of the Congress when they came back, is to keep his word to repeal and replace Obamacare, and we're going to make sure it happens.
Last question on this. It's long been a fundamental pillar of conservatism that government should stay out of the healthcare business. Then came Obamacare, and Republicans, obviously, as you're talking about, wanted to get rid of it right away and have fought to get in power to do that. Philip Klein says that liberals, quote, have won the central philosophical argument and Republicans are reduced to fighting over the mechanics. What's your reaction to that?
The central flaw of Obamacare was that liberals here in Washington, D.C. decided that it would be appropriate for the federal government to order every American to buy health insurance, whether they want it or need it or not. It was nothing short of a government takeover of health care. It came with it mandates and tax penalties for people that wouldn't buy health insurance. In a very real sense, it stifled innovation, it stifled growth in the American economy, and the American people know it. The central element of the president's vision for health care reform is to expand to a national marketplace, to allow the American people to purchase health insurance across state lines, and literally where in some jurisdictions, in some counties in America, under the current system, people only have one insurance product to choose from. The president and I envision an American healthcare economy where people literally have hundreds or even thousands of health insurance products, not ordered by the government, but that they can choose from and have some assistance from the government through tax credits and otherwise to participate in. It really is a choice between Obamacare, which was about government mandates and taxes and the heavy hand of Washington, D.C., versus unleashing the power of the free marketplace and especially unleashing the power of states to innovate in Medicaid in ways that will improve people's lives.
So you're still confident?
We're very confident. Because of President Trump's leadership and support here in the Congress, I'm very confident we'll repeal and replace Obamacare, and that'll all be done by this spring.
The WikiLeaks revelations, the CIA in a public statement yesterday said that the law prohibits the agency from conducting electronic surveillance inside the U.S. Nevertheless, there are many Americans, there are even some lawmakers who are concerned that these new leaks are further proof that we live in a surveillance state. What do you say to them?
Well, what I say is, first and foremost, I obviously cannot confirm whether or not the documents that have made their way into the public through WikiLeaks are actual CIA documents. But if in fact these documents, as alleged, are from the CIA, what I can say is it would represent one of the most significant compromises of national security in recent memory. And the fact that this took place more than a year ago under the last administration, I can assure you, at the President's direction, we're carefully examining these allegations, and if proven to be true and confirmed publicly, I can assure you that no resource will be spared in holding those account who have leaked information that could well constitute a compromise of methods and a compromise of our national security.
You know that candidate Trump on the trail said many positive things about WikiLeaks.
Boy, that WikiLeaks has done a job on her, hasn't it? Oh, we love WikiLeaks. Boy, they have really, WikiLeaks, they have revealed a lot. This WikiLeaks is unbelievable. What we've learned about her and her people, what they've said about her behind her back, but now it's not behind her back.
Just today, Senator Ben Sasse said that Julian Assange should, quote, spend the rest of his life wearing an orange jumpsuit. So the question is, will the Trump administration pursue charges against the WikiLeaks founder?
Well, let me say, without confirming the validity of these documents that have made their way in the public domain, that trafficking in national security information, as is alleged WikiLeaks has done here, is a very serious offense. And it represents a compromise of the security of the American people. And this president and this administration will take that very seriously and use the full force of the law and the resources of the United States to hold all of those to account that were involved.
What did you first think when you saw those tweets about wiretapping from President Trump?
Well, I know there were press accounts that alluded to those matters, and the President and I are very confident that the bipartisan congressional committees that are examining issues that emanated in last year's campaign will now consider those allegations as well. Look, the American people have a right to know, and we're very confident that those congressional committees will examine the facts before them in a proper setting and come to the conclusions and resolve those issues in an appropriate way.
Why couldn't you pick up the phone and find out?
Well, I think there are some appropriate limitations on activities of that nature, and the President and our administration want to be very respectful of the process and ensuring that our congressional committees have the latitude to get the information they need to get to the bottom of those allegations and other allegations that have been raised. We're confident that they'll have.
You think it's possible that President Obama ordered the wiretap on candidate Trump?
I think we'll just let the congressional committees review that and answer those questions. Those are knowable answers. And the bipartisan congressional committees can appropriately review the facts.
Mr. Vice President, stand by if you would. Special report continues with Vice President Pence after this break. We'll continue the interview with Vice President Pence on a number of other topics in just a few minutes. First, the head of U.S. Central Command says he's going to need a lot more troops on the ground in the Middle East and Afghanistan to do what the Commander-in-Chief wants done. National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin is live tonight from the Pentagon with details. Good evening, Jennifer.
Good evening, Brett. Just yesterday, hundreds of U.S. Marines arrived in Syria to provide artillery cover in the fight for Raqqa. Now, General Joe Votel says more U.S. troops will be needed in Afghanistan.
You agree that we're in a stalemate in Afghanistan after 15 years?
Mr. Chairman, I do.
I guess my question is, are we developing a strategy to break this stalemate? And is it going to require additional U.S. troops?
I do believe it will involve additional forces to ensure that we can make the advise and assist mission more effective.
General Votel said today the additional U.S. troops are needed because so many Afghan ones were killed by the Taliban last year. Some wonder whether the U.S. is inching back toward nation building and how more troops fit in with the president's vision of America first. President Trump is still weighing the new Pentagon plan to defeat ISIS. General Votel indicated he wants more troops for Syria, too.
I think as we move more towards the latter part of these operations, into more of the stability and other aspects of the operations, we will see more conventional forces requirements, perhaps.
U.S. troops are needed to hold former ISIS territory. In northwest Syria, U.S. Army Rangers waving American flags were sent to cool tensions between NATO ally Turkey and U.S.-trained Kurdish forces, both fighting ISIS.
The issue here really is not only defining the mission, but preventing mission creep in terms of starting to find ourselves committed not just to destroying ISIS, but to somehow refereeing a very complicated situation. I foresee a train wreck here.
We've just learned 1,000 U.S. soldiers are being sent to Kuwait to serve as a reserve force to fight ISIS, Brett.
Jennifer Griffin live at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. General Votel also says an exhaustive review of the U.S. raid in Yemen that left a Navy SEAL dead concludes there were no lapses in judgment or decision-making surrounding that operation. Chief Special Warfare Officer William Ryan Owens died. 6 other American service members were injured and a U.S. helicopter was lost. General Votel says the U.S. did gain valuable information during that raid. Congressional leaders were briefed late today on what investigators have uncovered so far about Russian activities leading up to last November's election. FBI Director James Comey was part of that classified briefing on Capitol Hill today. I start with a question on the Russia investigation in part 2 of my interview with Vice President Pence. Understanding that all the intelligence officials who have talked about this, all the committee chairmen who have talked about the evidence so far, say they have found 0 evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russians. Understanding that, there are these reports about these connections. Konstantin Kilmanek, a Ukrainian Russian with Paul Manafort, who meets with him and briefs him on Ukraine and apparently gets the plank out of the GOP platform. Are you concerned, as some of these reports come out, about connections with campaign officials?
Well, let me just say, I think we're very confident that the bipartisan congressional committees that are examining information that's been made available to them will arrive at the right conclusion and give the American people the facts. I think when the former director of National Intelligence said just a week ago that in the report he prepared by the end of the year there was no evidence of collusion between Russian officials and our campaign, I think that speaks with great authority. But look, I have to tell you, as I travel around the country and as we move forward in this campaign, I honestly believe that while Washington, D.C. seems at times preoccupied with these issues, the American people are really preoccupied with an economy that seems to be getting back on its feet. Nearly 300,000 jobs created in February. They're seeing a president energetically keeping his word to the American people to repeal and replace Obamacare, roll back regulations, authorize the Keystone and Dakota pipelines, and I think that focusing on the future of the American people and letting congressional committees examine any questions about the past is probably appropriate.
U.S. Marines are now on the ground in Syria. It seems like a big line that conventional troops are now there for all that we heard about the concern whether we were going to do that or not. What do the American people need to know about that operation, and how big is it going to be? We never discuss troop movements. As the father of a United States Marine, I can fully appreciate the importance of never signaling to the wider world where our troops are or aren't, or activities they're involved in, Bret. But the President's made it very clear that we intend to hunt down and destroy ISIS. We have more than 5,000 American servicemen and women in the battle in Mosul right now. And the American people can be assured that President Trump will keep his word to the American people, that we will take those steps that are necessary to destroy ISIS and destroy its ability to inspire violence here in the homeland or bring violence to our people or our allies. But this is an escalation. As I said, I think that the fact that we're involved in the battle in Mosul, I can confirm, but I can also confirm that President Donald Trump is absolutely committed to taking those steps that are necessary to destroy ISIS. The story today that former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn has filed with the Department of Justice as a foreign agent for making more than $500,000 as a lobbyist essentially for Turkey. Your reaction to that, considering that, doesn't that mean, Mr. Vice President, that even if he didn't lie to you about what the Russian ambassador said or didn't say, that you would have had to fire him anyway? Well, let me say, hearing that story today was the first I heard of it. And I fully support the decision that President Trump made to ask for General Flynn's resignation. You're disappointed by the story? The first I heard of it, and I think it is an affirmation of the President's decision to ask General Flynn to resign. For the people out there who say this administration's not got its sea legs yet, that there's hollowness underneath the top appointments beyond what the Senate has done or not done in cabinet appointments, what do you say to them? Well, I say we faced unprecedented obstruction by Senator Schumer and Democrats here in the United States Senate, and I think the American people are getting tired of it. We almost got our entire cabinet confirmed in one of the slowest processes in the history of this country. And now, as we go through the process of continuing to fill out our administration, our hope is that the American people will let their voice be heard, that they're tired of the games, they're tired of Senator Schumer and Democrats in the Senate slow-walking our team. President Trump was elected to advance an agenda to make America great again. We're proud of the team that we have. We've made great strides, but it's time for the Senate to stop playing games. Let's debate all the issues. Let's debate all the legislation. That's what the Senate is for, but the time has come for Senate Democrats to step up and let the President's team have their team, and we'll move this country forward. And the other appointments below are going to happen. They're going to happen, and we're working with Senate leadership to make them happen, but it's time for the games to end. Mr. Vice President, we really appreciate your time. Thank you, Bret. We're going to listen very intently
to conservative leaders. This is the bill, but if there are ways to improve that bill and to give people greater confidence that we're all going to arrive at the same place where Obamacare is done and we've replaced it with the kind of health care reforms that'll lower the cost of health insurance by expanding people's choices and giving states more flexibility, and that's where we're headed.
The legislative process, people are saying, well, I'd love to have this in there, I'd love to have that in there. That's the legislative process. That's what we're going through. And what people are sort of learning is this reconciliation tool is pretty tight. There's a lot of stuff we would love to put in the bill, but unfortunately the Senate rules don't allow us to do that.
And that is why they're saying that they have 3 phases for this, and this is the first phase, this legislation that's on the Hill being debated now. The president tweeting today, despite what you hear in the press, health care is coming along great. We are talking to many groups, and it will end in a beautiful picture. Tonight, that beautiful picture is at the White House bowling alley with conservatives bowling for health care. But Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, one of those conservatives, said on Twitter, House health care bill can't pass Senate without major changes. To my friends in the House, pause, start over, get it right, don't get it fast. With that, let's bring in our panel. Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano, editor-in-chief of LifeZette Laura Ingram, Charles Lane, opinion writer for The Washington Post, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Okay, Laura, your thoughts of how Pence phrases it and where this stands tonight?
I think there's a desire to demonstrate unity, and the leadership, and of course Vice President Pence and President Trump, they want to tell the country that we're at this, we're working on it together. But I'm not sure they're going to be able to clear the hurdles that exist with this legislation. I understand what Paul Ryan is saying about the Byrd rule and so forth. Louis Gohmert and Jim Jordan, others are saying, look, we're in the majority. We have the power to change this Byrd rule. Why are we allowing this rule?
Let me just explain. This is Robert Byrd, deceased senator from West Virginia, who had a rule that a reconciliation bill that requires 51 votes can only include economic issues. It cannot include anything that doesn't deal with the economy, doesn't deal with taxes and money, and thereby crossing state lines and tort reform cannot be in a reconciliation bill.
So their point is this rule is an administrative rule, legislative rule that can be changed by the parties. That's one point. The other point that they make, and I have some sympathy for this is the chance to get this right and really do it right. Tom Cotton says, why the rush? I mean, you kind of get the sense for him it's a bum's rush to push this thing through as fast as they are. And I think the longer this goes on, the harder it's going to be for them to pass it. From Talk Radio Land and other conservative groups that are fiscally conservative and want to have a good example for the rest of the country, really bring costs down of health care, this doesn't do it for them.
All right, Judge, the answer to that from the administration point of view, we've heard is you got to get this out first before you can do tax reform or anything else.
Right.
Number one. Number two, it's better than Obamacare.
Right.
And like Reagan, take the 80% loaf.
Right. I understand those arguments. And the president himself made another one either last night or today saying if we don't do this, the 2018 congressional elections are going to be a bloodbath, meaning the Democrats are going to gain seats in the House. I'm entirely with Laura. I'm entirely with the small government folks. I don't see the reason to rush. The essence of Obamacare is the federal micromanagement of the health care system, and that essence remains in this legislation. And the time to get rid of it is right now, because they're never going to have greater numbers in the House and the Senate in the next 4 years than they do at this moment.
Chuck.
Whatever rules they have to change to permit them to do this, they should do so.
Chuck.
They don't have the votes. Let's just be clear here.
With this current, as it stands today, this legislation.
And not only that, they don't have the votes to do the extra stuff, like the across state lines. At least they don't clearly have those votes. As Paul Ryan explained, that would be the third prong. That would be this additional stuff, he said. And I don't know who the Democrats are in the Senate who are going to
Well, there's 11 of them, as I pointed out yesterday, in states that 80% of the counties went to Donald Trump,
yes,
that are up for re-election in 2018.
And I'm not sure how many of them will vote to put their state insurance commissioner out of business by allowing people. But anyway, that's a separate point. That's point one. Point two is the Republicans are now in the business of taking something away. When was the last time the federal government abolished any program, let alone a program this big? It's hugely risky politically. And I think that's the bottom line reason people like Tom Cotton and others are hesitating. Yes, they promised to do it. But the first, the Democrats are just, waiting for the first person to lose his Medicaid, blame it on Paul Ryan, and I think that's what they legitimately are afraid of.
But when you come to politics, aren't we always one election away from dealing with the big thing anyway?
But the problem is that the big thing here is an entitlement that nobody, Republican or Democrat, will take away. The one thing that everybody agreed, conservatives, Republicans, in this election and all the elections, is we are not going to change the innovation that you cannot lose your insurance or be priced out of the market if you have a pre-existing condition. Is anybody going to vote to take that away? No. That's the essence of Obamacare. That's what was introduced. And the reason that you have this, even in the Ryan plan, why you have this intrusion into the market and the federal government dictating, is because in order to keep that provision, you have to create an entitlement. It can be, as in Obamacare, a subsidy. It can be the refundable tax credit. But if you want people to have that, and you name me one Republican who wants to abolish it, then the essence of Obamacare is retained, and you have to face that fact.
Well, that was the point of my question about the mechanics rather than the philosophy about it. But let me go down the road real quick. So do they pass a bill, whether it evolves or not, this time?
Out of the House, yes.
And not the Senate?
I don't know.
I'm saying Congress, but...
Yeah.
Yes, the House does succeed in passing this hot potato to the Senate.
No.
No, not this one that we've been talking about.
All right, Judge. The Trump administration pursued charges against the WikiLeaks founder.
Trafficking in national security information, as is alleged WikiLeaks has done here, is a very serious offense. This president and this administration will take that very seriously and use the full force of the law and the resources of the United States to hold all of those to account that were involved.
All right, so the FBI is in search of a mole hunt tonight, a leaker. Meantime, the CIA is adamant that they're not surveilling U.S. citizens, and the Vice President echoed that statement as well.
I don't think anybody in the Intelligence Committee takes seriously those denials. I think the documents that they released, however they got them, show conclusively and unambiguously that the CIA has been plying its tradecraft on Americans in the United States, even intimately in our homes. We're one step away from totalitarianism when I'm in front of the microwave in my kitchen and they can hear what I'm talking about. And when they can use my cell phone as a recording device, whether it's in my pocket or on the front seat of my car. And I am happy that we know about this, because when a violation of constitutional liberties of this magnitude is going on in an organized way by the government, no matter what party controls it, the American people need to know.
You don't buy the denials at all, that it's not happening, that there's a firm red line between...
I don't buy the denials because my friends, our friends in the intelligence community don't buy the denials.
All right, Laura?
The competency of this government to guard its secrets is beyond devastated by the WikiLeaks revelations. We now know, according to the reporting today, that somewhere between 200 and 1,000 individuals had access to the knowledge of these hacking tools. They have to now go through the 200 to 1,000, including a lot of contractors. A lot of them have offices near Dulles Airport. They have a lot of interviews to do. Whether they're going to find who leaked this, we don't know. But it looks like it could be a contractor.
Should WikiLeaks be liable? Should WikiLeaks come under some kind of legal?
Yeah, of course they should. But I agree with what Judge Napolitano is saying. I don't think anyone can trust the intelligence agency, given what we know now about the incompetency of even guarding their own secrets. They're not able to guard their own secrets.
Quickly.
And they're the spy agency?
Number one, I've never trusted my microwave. So it's a good principle to stick to. The other thing is we have never discussed Ecuadorian elections here before, but we should, because there's an upcoming election. Remember, Assange is in the Ecuadorian embassy. He's got asylum in London, and the opposition candidate who's in a runoff, which is going to happen soon, has pledged that he's going to kick him out of the embassy, in which case he could be snatched, he could be brought here and tried. So let's hope that we're interfering in the Ecuadorian election.
Chuck, we'll come back to you at the other side of the break. Next up, foreign policy and expanding the fight against ISIS.
Let me make it clear that we never discuss troop movements. You know, as the father of a United States Marine, I can fully appreciate the importance of never signaling to the wider world where our troops are or aren't, or activities they're involved in.
But this is an escalation.
As I said, I think that the fact that we're involved in the battle in Mosul, I can confirm, but I can also confirm that President Donald Trump is absolutely committed to taking those steps that are necessary to destroy ISIS.
Vice President, there also on Capitol Hill, General Votel, the head of U.S. Central Command, who also said that he pledged to his commanders to meet their requests, and the conventional troops on the ground in Syria was one of the requests. What we don't know is how many troops, and there's also a call, we're back with the panel, for increases in Afghanistan. General Votel saying more troops on the ground in Afghanistan. I guess my questioning was about when do you brief the American people? There was a lot of criticism of President Obama that he didn't bring America with the effort. And when do you make that case?
Boy, I sure wondered the same thing, especially with that rather stark statement by General Votel about there being a stalemate in Afghanistan that we can't break. Yeah, when does President Trump come before the American people and say, guess what, I'm putting ground troops into Syria? And apparently at an open-ended commitment. Now, I think there's a couple issues going on here. One is he's going to have to belly up to the question of the legal authority at some point. We're still, as I understand it, out at the long end of the original 9/11 legal authority to have troops in the Middle East. That's point one. But I think he's going to have to explain to people, this is part of my strategy to crush ISIS. This is what I promised you. And I think people would buy that. And they'll give him some latitude for that. Ultimately, though, it's going to be judged on whether or not they do crush ISIS. They're making some progress in Mosul, and then Raqqa is supposedly the end game.
For a candidate, though, Judge, who didn't talk about, he definitely talked about crushing ISIS, but didn't talk about a long-term U.S. presence in a lot of these countries, to hear General Votel say, we're going to be in Afghanistan for 15 years.
It didn't sound as though the White House was aware of what the general was going to say before he said it. I agree entirely with what Chuck just said. There is no legal authority for this. Candidate Trump condemned the concept of troops on the ground, called the invasion of Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, the worst military disasters in American history. It's inconceivable that he thinks there's an American public appetite for troops on the ground.
Laura, I want to turn to General Flynn and this revelation that he has filed with the Department of Justice as a foreign agent because of lobbying work he did for Turkey before getting to be National Security Advisor. You know, when I asked Vice President Pence about it, he said it's the first he heard about it in that report. But either the thing that he got fired for or this, we're going to get him kicked out of that job.
Yeah, I mean, it's inconceivable that he didn't reveal this.
Or that it wasn't vetted.
I mean, by the Trump team. I mean, to apply as a foreign agent, to work or consult for a foreign government, that's no easy task. It's a lot of paperwork, but it's
By the way, he did it
reveal.
Retroactively with the Department of Justice.
Oh, so he didn't? Okay, so that was done. And yeah, well, so I think it's way beyond. It's way beyond what we thought it was for Flynn, and I've always liked General Flynn, but that is a gross oversight. Can I just go back to the Syria thing for a moment? Because remember, in October of 2015, Donald Trump did say that one time he threw around the numbers 20,000 and 30,000 ground troops that he said that's what he had heard would be necessary to take out ISIS. We also have to remember, though, for every forward combat operating officer, you need 3 support personnel. This could be more like 90,000 U.S. troops on the ground in Syria. And for someone who ran it as America First, I think this kind of thing goes on and on and on and on. It's the kind of thing that could swallow his presidency. You saw it at the end of the Bush presidency. I think it could be very difficult for him.
And let's remember one thing which makes the deployment in Syria all the more problematic. This is not American troops who are out there to go and storm Raqqa, destroy ISIS, and liberate the country. These are American troops who are being interposed between our allies, the Turks and the Kurds, who are beginning to fight each other as they approach Raqqa. So we are acting as referees. This is a 6 one-sided conflict. It is unbelievably complicated. 6 years ago, it wasn't. It was something that was understandable, and we might have made a difference. But at this point, with all the combatants, with the rifle fire coming from all places, this is a very dangerous operation without an obvious mission.
So let's also be clear that let's say they are very successful and they quickly deal with ISIS in Raqqa. What about holding Raqqa? And who is holding it? Because you have all kinds of different groups. You have Russia. You have Bashar al-Assad, who President Obama said had to leave many times, but now apparently doesn't. So how do we hold it?
Well, it's not even clear we are going to be occupying it. As Charles describes it, it reminds me eerily of the ill-fated mission to Lebanon in the early 1980s, where essentially the U.S. Marines were sort of put in there, as he says, to kind of keep other factions apart. And as we know, that did not work out well. I'm hesitant, though, to prejudge this. You have to remember that even President Obama's former Deputy Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, after leaving office, was calling for a more aggressive U.S. position in precisely this region. So there's a lot of expert opinion that says we had to do something. If we were serious about crushing ISIS, we had to do something in Raqqa.
But that's easy to recommend after you leave office.
It's a lot of expert opinion on Iraq, and that didn't end well either.
But
well, I mean, are we going to crush ISIS, or are we not going to crush ISIS?
But when you look around the world right now, we have a lot of hotspots, and there's a lot juggling inside that White House. North Korea is the biggest of them. That's it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. The first 100 days, hosted by Sandra Smith tonight, starts right now.